I was a writer and editor for about 25 years, and I was working in the area of nonfiction. And I don't know if any of you have written nonfiction or done scholarly work, and it's a very exacting science, let's just say. And you're very much tied to facts and to footnoting and to have endless research. And I did that with a lot of love. And I was also a journalist. I also wrote for magazines and things like that. So the thing is, all of that requires you attending to the story very intently. And so when I came to this, it was just a delightful opportunity to create stories that I thought needed to be told without having to do that kind of work, to be able to invent someone. And I think there's a lot of hidden histories. I mean, we don't, we talk about our mothers, but there's big gaps in our understanding of those women. We know their story, but we only know some of their story. And I think there's some tremendous hidden histories out there. And I think especially the history of women following World War II and going back into domestic life, I think those are important stories, but we don't hear them very often. So I thought I can create those stories because I have researched, I have read some memoirs, I have investigated, I can tell those stories through the medium of Margaret. And I've also spent a lot of time in archives and museums, both in Britain and in Canada, across Canada. And so I have an idea of what goes into a lot of these kinds of boxes and displays, so I wanted to use those skills as well. So, and the motivation for this as a show really came out of my concern around war and what's happening globally now with war and the fact what happens afterwards, especially for women. When they come back to the ruins, we've seen them coming back to the ruins in Gaza, Ukraine, and they have to rebuild their lives and the impact of that on them, And so this was my opportunity to explore that. My mom was born during the Second World War. Now, she wasn't an adult like Margaret. I've made Margaret an adult during the war. But my mother was a child during the Blitz and understood what it was like to be thrown under the bed and covered with her parents' bodies while the bombs were falling. So, and I know it affected her. I know it affected her deeply. And what I've discovered through this show is people telling me all of the ways in which the war affected their parents. Sometimes in Germany, sometimes in England, Denmark, Holland, people sharing those kinds of stories. So that's one aspect. I'm also a mother, and I know what it's like to feel overwhelmed by being a mother, especially in difficult circumstances. And the doll houses, that's something I'm very committed to. From the point of view of women's history, and it's an art form in and of itself. But many women that I know do doll housing as a form of therapy. So all of these things do come, there's some of my experience and my family history in there too. And other women I've known, yeah. Well, somebody gave me a kit, a long time ago now, and probably about 15, 20 years ago. I'm trying to remember when, and I made the dollhouse. But it seemed kind of Mickey Mouse for me. I made this kit and it just didn't do enough. And then I started looking at, vintage miniatures, and it became quite an addiction for me. And then I started restoring them, and I realized what a story they told. So it hit on my love of history, my love of story. It's an art form, and I've made quite a few things that go in the doll houses, and I've created little lives in them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's how it started. Yeah. So there's a number of artists that I follow and that I'm really interested in. A sculptor that I really love is Phillida Barlow. I keep saying her name because she's impressed me so much. So if any of you put her name into a YouTube channel, she's now passed away, but she's a tremendous inspiration to me. But of the fictive artists, I have a few books here, and one of them's by Carol Sawyer, and she did a thing called the Natalie Brettschneider Project, which was in Victoria. And she invented a data artist, is it data?
Data.
Okay, data artist called Natalie Brettschneider. And she had this amazing exhibit at the Victoria Art Gallery. And it's toured now, and it was developed over a 20-year period, I think. And the first time I went through it, I thought she was real. I went through and I was so excited. I thought, oh, I've got to write about this one. This is tremendous. And then I got Sheila to come back, and we went again. And then I read the fine print, and I found out that she was invented, and I just was delighted. I was thrilled. And the imagination. So if any of you want to have a quick look at that book, you're more than welcome. Another one is Iris Hausler. And if any of you are familiar with the Art Gallery of Ontario, there was a wonderful exhibit there, a very controversial one called He Named Her Amber. And they basically took people through with white coats and had them look at artifacts of an artist that they had found in the walls, her work in the walls of the old art gallery, you know, the old building. They did all of this. They took people through very seriously. It was multi-layered. And then at the end, they were given a letter. And then they opened it and found out that this was all fake. The problem was that many people took this personally. They were very upset. There were letters, people withdrew their memberships to the Art Gallery of Ontario, if you can believe it, and wrote scathing letters, which she includes actually in here, some of them. And man, they make an interesting reading. I would have just been delighted, but other people felt humiliated. And so that's why for my show, I tell people at the outset, because I don't want them to feel that way. And the woman who I've put a quote from over there, Gülsen Kara Mustafa, very interesting Turkish artist if you get a chance to look at her work. She did a piece where in the 60s she was imprisoned in Turkey during student riots and things. And she was imprisoned with women and children in prison. And after she got out, she painted pictures of what her experience in prison. Years later, after the governments changed and things became better, she brought out those paintings. And people were overwhelmed by them because they came to life a piece of their history that had been suppressed. And then she, in the course of telling that story, she said, art can sometimes keep memory. And that just stayed with me. It can keep memory, not just preserve memory, keep it. So. Well, I say, you know, if she's real to you, then she's real. But for me, she's fiction. Like, I know that I've created her, although I do channel her quite a bit. You know, I think a lot about, well, Margaret wouldn't have liked that, you know? And so I do have that in my mind, but it is interesting. I've had people actually argue with me at the end that she must be real, you know, or she's your mother, you know, and that kind of stuff. So I just try to be diplomatic. Yeah. Yeah, and the reason for that, why I called it My Name is Margaret, is us women, we have men's names. We have our father's name, or we have our husband's names. We don't have a separate kind of name. It's always going to be with a male connection in the family. And I thought, what is our name? What name can we truly say is our own? And it's our first name. And so I wanted to make that, Margaret is her name. And also, when women go through this experience of psychosis, they don't know themselves. They often hallucinate. They don't have any idea about, who their relationships are, who their children are. They go into psychosis. And I have, the turning point for her is when she declares, my name is Margaret. So that's a turning point in the story. And that's a really interesting one because I didn't expect that. I haven't been writing as much. I spent when you do it to deadline for a long time, for decades, you do get kind of like you want to retire a bit, you know. And but writing always stays with you. And so I wrote Margaret's diary, and a lot of people have read it and asked me, where's the book coming from? Like, when's the book coming out? And so now I'm really exploring the idea of fiction. I usually only write nonfiction, so that will be a new avenue for me. So I do think there will be a book, but it may be a little while yet. Oh, and the show I hope will go on to a public gallery. That's my dream for the show. I don't know. She would have probably thought that it shouldn't be out there in the public, maybe, or that she might have had some reservations, I think, about this whole thing being out there, you know, and that it was a private matter for her. She might have had some shame. I think a lot of people who've been institutionalized do have a lot of shame about that, and their fear of being judged. So she might have had some reservations. But then again, maybe she would have celebrated it. Who knows? Thank you all for coming. I much appreciate it. It was great to see you here.